Between the early and late 20th century, Newcastle City Council aimed to solve traffic problems through the construction of pedestrian underpasses. A simple idea of placing routes for pedestrians underneath busy roads to avoid conflicts with cars. Throughout this period, several prominent redevelopments in the city featured underpasses, such as Swan House and West Denton's new centre. Concerns over the safety and maintenance of these underpasses became an increasing concern for pedestrians as time progressed, with multiple newspaper articles mentioning the perceptions of safety or attacks in underpasses. A report conducted in 1979 by Newcastle City Council stated that of 42 pedestrian underpasses surveyed, 29 highlighted extensive vandalism. The construction of underpasses has slowed in recent years, with some subways being closed off and filled in their replacement, service level crossings and traffic lights. But how have many of these underpasses fared to this day? To better understand underpasses in the city, I spoke to Ian Cook at Northumbria University.
Hiya, I'm Ian Cook. I am a lecturer at Northumbria University and I've done a research project about these things here. So pedestrian underpasses of subways. I was working with other colleagues at Northumbria University and we're very interested in various things to do with these, particularly people's experience of them. You know, how much people use them, how they use them, and how people feel about using such places, like this one in West Denton. Pedestrian underpass or a subway is not the easiest thing to define, so they often blur into other things. So with this issue in mind, myself and my colleagues tried to define what they were. It wasn't the easiest thing. And so we came up with this idea that pedestrian underpasses were essentially tunnels. And they were tunnels that go beneath roads or railways, where pedestrians can move through and where vehicles are either banned from or their use is highly restricted. One of the things that we looked at when we did the project on the underpasses in Newcastle was to think about the design of these sorts of places. So this particular underpass that goes underneath West Denton Way in West Denton has a very sort of familiar feel to it in terms of the design. And you can see that there are various things that have been put in to stop people from doing certain things. So for example, you can see, I assume this wasn't here in the first place, this little barrier here. So presumably this is here to stop people going through in cars, motorbikes maybe, well I suspect you can still get around it there and so on. And also potentially to encourage cyclists to slow down. But also there are other design features that they've put in. Not many, but a few. So if we go in, what's interesting about this underpass is that on the other side of the wall, on the other side of the tunnel, is that there clearly used to be lights over there as well. And I believe that technology of lighting has changed. I don't know much about the lighting technology or anything like that, but they don't need lights on both sides. But what's curious is about how this affects people's feelings about them. When you've got one side that's clearly lit and another side where they've stopped lighting it, whether rightly or wrongly. There are other design features here as well. If you think about the paint's fairly light touch technology, but you can see that there's a constant ongoing battle, I guess, with people who like to write on the walls and those people who try and maintain the underpasses. What we can see here, if we get a little bit closer, for example, is that you could see that there was an original sort of tile decoration, if that's the right term. But now they've clearly thought it's much cheaper and quicker to paint over it. So lots of underpasses in Newcastle have this very familiar colour to it. And that is, I'm guessing, magnolia. Through the project, when looking at people's experience of underpasses, is the issue of age. Now underpasses, I guess, are for everyone, whether old, young, etc, etc. But I think a lot of people associate underpasses with younger people, and they've become places where younger people might hang out, which in theory is good. But I guess the downside of that is that certain people are less likely to use such places and more likely to go across the road for fear of younger people, certain younger people hanging out there. And we're in West Denton, and this has been, in past years, an area where younger people have been hanging out in the streets, often through a lack of things to do and places to go, and hanging out near or inside the underpasses. We're at an underpass. It's on the east side of West Denton Road. And if we come inside, we can perhaps see what's happened in here. So we're inside one of the underpasses under West Denton Way. And this is an underpass which is, I'm not sure if I want to use the word notorious, but well known. And it's well known because for several years it's had this burnt out look about it. And it's burnt out, I suspect, because things have been set on fire in a trolley, probably from Morrison's just up the road, and this has happened. And I guess people living here, people like me, people like you, would look at this and think, would I want to come through here? And I guess the finger has been pointed at kids hanging around. So this may be a demonstration as to whose underpass this is, what belongs in an underpass, and so on and so forth. We've got a very different feel to it, haven't we? It's burnt out, we can see. In theory, we've got a nice little safety mechanism here, but the lighting, well, is quite literally missing. And if we go along a little bit, we can see that these underpasses would have this regular paint job, getting rid of graffiti. And dare I say here, they've stopped doing it. It's literally been unpainted for several years. And dare I say, if we look at the floor as well, it's probably not being cleaned very often. So when I spoke to lots of people about their experience of underpasses, people worried about safety, but often people worried more generally about the cleanliness of them. And I guess we can see over the last 10, 15 years, there's been this huge decline in the cleanliness of public space, which often comes from local government cuts. And I guess this is a demonstration of it. Look at the floor, look what's on the floor. Is that a tent? I'm not sure. We've got cans, we've got crisp packets, we've got McDonald's from just around the corner. Pedestrian underpasses have a long history in the UK. In London, for example, there's lots of old newspaper articles that discuss the opening of them in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. Newcastle was quite a bit later on than that. So most pedestrian underpasses in Newcastle were built between the late 1950s and the mid 1990s, and probably the late 60s to early 70s were at their heyday. Another theme we're interested in the project, and we asked lots of people about, was art in underpasses. So underpasses, I guess, are fairly well known for having lots of graffiti in, often. But also, like this underpass here, which is the Jesmond Road underpass. So Jesmond Road is just over here. Because if you follow me, we can see various mosaics. So this underpass was built in the late 70s. And at the time of opening, an organisation called Town Teacher, who were a charity, are very interested in getting kids to learn outside. And they got local school kids to help design, and possibly not put in, but design at least, the different mosaics down in this underpass. You can see however many down here, let's say 10, 12, I can't count. And you can see, for example, that they're celebrating Newcastle as it hits the early 80s. So the introduction of the metro, you can just about see it here, and various other things here. Lots of things from local history, lots of local buildings. You've got the Civic Centre here. What else have we got? We've got the various bridges and so on and so forth. I won't go through all of them, but I guess it's that thing you've got to think about as to whether these improve the experience of going from A to B, or whether they make the experience worse in some way, and more importantly, whether they're better than other forms of art. So if we have a look here, for example, clearly we can see that there's been an ongoing battle here between the contractors who clean up and the people that write on these walls as well. One issue that I've thought about a lot with this project is people's experience of underpasses, like this one here in Exhibition Park, at night. So thinking about whether people use them at night, who might use them, what it's like to go through there, and what your options are if you don't want to go through there. So if you think about this one here, there's not much choice, is there? You can't go across the road, you have to go through it. The question of what should happen to underpasses is an interesting one. So I'm a bit torn as to what I think should happen to them. Certainly, I think underpasses and public spaces more generally should be cleaned more often. They're often very dirty places and they don't feel very nice going through as a result. There's also the issue of them feeling quite unsafe as well, particularly for certain people, perhaps people that don't look like me. And that's harder to remedy. So some people might say you need to knock them down, fill them in, create crossings at surface level with traffic lights and so on and so forth. And that seems like a sensible suggestion. In some instances, that's not possible. But some people would say you probably need wider change in society. Some people we spoke to said that there weren't necessarily easy fixes for underpasses. So some people said, for example, that you can knock them down, you can build crossings at surface level, but that doesn't stop, for example, women feeling unsafe in public space. There's much more structural and, dare I say, expensive things that need to happen in order for women, to take the example, to feel safer in public space.